All right, Monster, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone. So my role, first off, as a chiropractor and why we're actually open, and I'm talking about chiros, osteos, physios and things like that, is that people mightn't be aware that 30 to 40% of the people that actually admitted to hospital come to them for musculoskeletal issues. So they're trying to keep us open, or APRA, which is our registration board, is trying to keep us open as long as possible to alleviate a lot of pressure on the hospitals by, and at some stage the hospitals will not be accepting any musculoskeletal issues if they get this flood or this wave of clients which they're seeing in other countries as well. So that's why we're open, and if you're wondering why chiros, physios and osteos are opening, and we're just alleviating that pressure on the medical system. So that being said, then I want to talk about COVID-19 or coronavirus and what it is and why I suppose that there's a lot of fear and around it. But first off, I want to state that it's not something you should fear, but it's something that you should give respect to. And what I mean by that is that I've got a 47-kilo dog, and I'm not afraid of that dog whatsoever, but at the same time, I'm not going to allow my 3-year-old to be there with that dog by themselves. So I respect the dog, but I don't fear it. Okay, it's the same sort of thing as this virus. The more understanding you have of it, the better you'll be, and your fear will go right down. So hopefully I can give that to you today. So let's talk about the virus itself. It is a droplet-based product, and what that means is it can't survive out of the body unless it's within a droplet. And what we're talking about droplet, we'll talk about spit or a fluid of some sort coming out of you. And generally, we're talking about the virus travels in sneezes and coughs. And we're talking about a sneeze will travel at about 148 kilometers an hour as it comes out. And that sneeze can travel around 1.2 meters, unless we're trying to go for distance. So it travels about 1.2 meters, hence the 1.5 meter distance is what we're looking at. Okay, so this is why they're traveling at that 1.5 distance. So what we can do, understand that the virus is like a tennis ball with arms. And what I mean by that is that it's got all these things that can grab hold of you. However, it doesn't have any legs, so it can't move. So the only way that it's going to be transferred to others is in those droplets, or if you brush up against someone or someone touches someone, that it can grab onto them. So therefore you need to wash your hands and get that hygiene really, really good. But then again, there's also the other side of it, is that in order for it to get to your lungs, you have to either breathe it in from the droplets in the air from someone sneezing or coughing, or you're putting your face, you're touching your face with your hands and putting them near your nose and your mouth in order for it to get to the lungs itself. So what we can do to protect ourselves, one thing, we can increase our immunity. We can practice good hygiene, obviously, but we can increase our immunity. And a lot of people are talking about vitamin C, and it is very, very crucial. Where they're even using it in America to treat people with COVID. Singapore has told all its residents to get intravenous vitamin C. So it's actually really important. There's a lot of data out there to show how important vitamin C is. And we're talking, I'm taking currently 20,000 milligrams a day. If you don't know, so one of those little tablets that people are getting, between 500 to 1,000 milligrams. What I'm doing, I've worked out that 20,000 milligrams is what they call your bowel tolerance for me individually. How you work that out is getting around 4,000 milligrams into you, and then every 15 minutes having another 1,000 milligrams until your tummy feels squirmy or it comes out the other end. And then you tone it back 1,000, and then that should be your daily dose. Okay. A lot of people talk of, 2,000 milligrams being a high dose. Well, I'm taking 20,000, but that's my bowel tolerance. That will increase your immunity, and therefore understand that if that gets to your mucosa or the covering of your nasal passage and throat, therefore your immune system can actually stop it before it gets down into your lungs. Second part is I talk of rice water. That's cooking up a little bit of rice, about that much, and actually having a dessert spoon of that water. And what that does is it goes down to your gut, but it's starch. And all your probiotics, which a lot of people know about, those probiotics within your own gut will proliferate. So you can either have some rice water every day, which we do in our family, or you can have probiotics. And what probiotics do is, again, that mucosa that I was talking about, or the lining of your nasal system and your throat and lungs, that will produce IgA levels, increase IgA levels, and that's what the probiotics do. And what the IgA will do is that COVID, when it gets into you, it'll eat it up. Okay? So, all right, so let's talk about the COVID-19, what it actually does if it actually gets into you. Well, what happens? It goes down into your lungs and irritates the lungs, obviously. Then what the lungs do, the lungs will scream for help, 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 help. And what comes to those areas is what they call cytokines. Cytokines are like your alarm system to the immune system. So they go to those areas that have been affected, and then they start screaming, help, 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 help. The problem with that is that it calls in more cytokines, which is a good thing. But what the virus does, which is an RNA type virus, they actually invade those cells, get into the cells, and what it does there, it replicates. And what it does to the cytokines, it makes them overstimulate them, so they call more cytokines in, and therefore the virus can replicate a lot more, so that's a good thing. Also, what these cytokines do, they call for what they call killer T cells, or T1 cells. And they come from your thymus, which sits underneath here. And why they're important, they're the Pac-Man of your body, and they will chew up the virus. So we want to encourage that behavior. And people don't understand, but the thymus in children is really, really big. So they produce a lot of these killer T cells, or these T1 cells. And they're fantastic because they do work. But this is why the children have got this great immunity. However, after puberty, that thymus will decrease in size. You produce killer T cells other areas, but this is really important. But by the time you're 75 years old, that thymus will be only a little bit of fatty tissue. So it doesn't produce much killer T cells whatsoever. So that's why the children have got this really good immunity, and it's not really attacking them. But what else? You're getting these cytokines. Cytokines will also call in what they call Th17 cells. And these are really important, and why people are dying. And what that means is that these Th17 cells will come to the area, and what they do, they make the cells of the lungs bring out fluid. And when they bring them out, which is phlegm. And why this is beneficial to the virus is because your lungs start filling up with fluid, and why it's beneficial to the virus is, what do you feel like doing then? You want to cough and sneeze and get that out. And that's just how it's spread. However, why it's detrimental to the organism is that your lungs fill up with fluid, therefore bacterium can get in there, like pneumonia, or pneumoniae, which is the bacterium of pneumonia, and that's where people are getting these respiratory issues. And then they get, on top of that, they get what they call a cytokine storm, and that gives you a fever and all these other symptoms as well. And so the pathophysiology, or what's happening in your body, this is why it's dangerous. But remember, now let's talk of some stats. Even though we sounds horrific, the amount of people that are dying from this virus, a lot of them are dying with it, not because of it. And also understand that if you're healthy, the 80% of people that get this virus will have minor, if not no symptoms. So when you look at the US stats, are a fantastic one to look at, that 98%, 98.4 to be precise, 98.4% of the people that are diagnosed with corona have an underlying health issue. I'll say that again. 98.4% of the people that have been diagnosed with corona have an underlying health issue. Okay, that says to me that people that are healthy are not either not getting it, or they're getting it so minor that they not even displaying symptoms, so don't even want to go and get tested, so they don't even know they've got it. So there's some stats. Another stats that are really effective that we need to look at, and actually you start got to dig a little bit deeper with these stats. And my wife she's a researcher, so that's how I know a fair bit about all these stats. The Italian, let's talk about the Italian stats and all the deaths they had. You tend to find that you look at the stats, they're that high in the death rate, but understand that death rate is was their total death rate. That if someone got hit by a car, they go into those stats. And then you actually see the stats go along and then they drop significantly. And that's where they, at that stage, when they found out what was going on, they differentiated between people who are dying of corona compared to their normal mortality rate. So this is what they're reporting on, is this, not this one down here. So it's not as severe in Italy as what they have you be aware of, or what the media is jumping on. You know, it's still, again, respect this, but understand that we need to not fear it. Okay. So when you look at the stats and look at how it's actually traveling, we're not traveling much worse than what a common flu is. Even though for us to hear that 1,600 people died in the US, you know, last night, I think, understand that that's not wavering too much from where we're at. What they're afraid of, though, is that with the flu, you get it one day, you get the symptom the next day. With COVID, you get it one day, you may not see it for 14 days. And the scared point about that is they don't know if you're contagious within those 14 days. This is why they're getting people to self-isolate for the 14 days. So that's the scary thing about this virus, is that you may be talking to people and they've got it, you might get it, you don't even know. Hopefully that's alleviated a bit of fear from you, and give you some tools that you can do. Obviously try and reduce your stress levels, because that's going to impact on your immunity within itself. Yeah, how's that, Moston?
That's great. Thanks, Simon. If anyone's got any questions, just send them through chat, or just let me know through the chat, and then we can go to you to ask those questions. I might kick it off though, mate. I'm sick of hearing flattening the curve.
Yep.
I understand. You know, there's obviously different modelling that came out yesterday and stuff like that. So can you sort of take us through what the government is actually trying to do with putting us into lockdown?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So because of those 14 days that we're talking about, and so they do believe that 70% of our population is going to get it. Okay. Understand that 70% of our population will get that. We'll get COVID-19. What they don't want is we all get it at the same time. So that's what we're talking about, flattening the curve. They believe that we'll all get it, but we don't want to get it all at the same time, because that will overwhelm the medical system. And that's when people that really need the help, the 5% of people over 75 that need the help, they won't be able to access it because we're overwhelmed. Also, too, I forgot to actually say, that response, that Th17 response, where you start producing fluid, vitamin D will down-regulate that response. So 10,000 IU of vitamin D will stop that response as well.
Great. We've got a couple of questions coming through, Simon. So Craig Nadeau, Craig, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hey, Craig.
Simon, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very well, but always getting better.
Good to hear. What vitamin C do you recommend we should be taking?
Oh, well, generally, look, most vitamin C, it's all about your bowel tolerance. So it doesn't really matter. Personally, for our family, what we do, we went down to a compound chemist, and there's plenty around, and then just ask them for ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, but ask for ascorbic acid, and we get it in the powder form. So generally how I have it, and my wife makes me up I should show, but just a little bottle. She puts the 20,000 milligrams in there with some orange juice, and I just stir it up and drink it during the day and just have sips of it. It tastes pretty harsh, but to be honest, now I'm actually pretty used to it. So any sort of vitamin C, just look at the milligram content of the ascorbic acid within that vitamin C, either tablet or powder, and then work it out for yourself.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
That's great. We might leave it there, Simon. I really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.
We'll get some details out around Simon and the instinctive chiropractic business with the information we send out after the webinar today. So thanks again, Simon.
Beautiful. Thanks. Hopefully I help.